Welcome to the Swiftly Spoken Eras Recap, a countdown to the Eras Tour. In these episodes, we're going to be recapping the highlights of each Taylor Swift era, almost like a mini crash course leading up to the Eras Tour in March. We will be doing these episodes for each era, and they'll be published every week for the next 10 weeks, leading to the beginning of the Eras Tour. We'll be talking about a few interesting facts from each era as a whole, but especially going over things like the tours or the set lists around that time and the performances that she gave, so we can try to take a guess as to what we may be seeing reappear in the Eras Tour by tracking her most popular songs from each time frame, the songs that have never been performed live before, and the unlikely options that seem to have been forgotten over time. For this first episode, we're going to be looking back at Taylor's debut album.
So Taylor's first fully defined era, eponymously named the Taylor Swift era, began a little over 16 years ago. Newly signed to Big Machine, what was then a very small label, and spurred on by her dreams of becoming a country singer in an extremely male-dominated, middle-aged genre, Taylor released Tim McGraw in June 2006, the lead single to her upcoming album, Taylor Swift.
The use of a self-titled album has always existed within the music industry, and it tends to be used as either an introduction to a musician and their music, or when artists feel the need to rebrand themselves. In the latter case, albums such as Harry Styles or Kelsey by Kelsey Ballerini may come to mind, released in transitional periods within their careers as musical acts. As for Taylor, her debut album was eponymously named as a way for her to introduce herself into the industry, tying her name to her music from the get-go. It was also a very clear way to leave people with only one thing to remember, one name, rather than a new artist name, plus also an obscure album title.
In the case of Taylor specifically, it also very much fits because of how extremely personal her music was and still is. Taylor's debut album was essentially a look into a diary of a teenager who struggled to fit in with her peers and dreamed of something more than her small town, and had her heart broken by boys who she gave a mention to in the prelogue of the album itself. In this prelogue, Taylor says, "To all the boys who thought they would be cool and break my heart, guess what? Here's 14 songs written about you. Ha." It was gutsy for a teenager to take such an approach in this genre, but the connection that she was able to establish with fans through this type of music and marketing was well worth it.
The eponymous album title wasn't the only clever case of naming in her debut album. As mentioned, we can define the start of the debut era by the release of Taylor's first ever fully fledged single. Though she had previously performed a variety of both released and unreleased tracks in the couple of years prior to the summer of 2006, the choice of Tim McGraw becoming Taylor's first ever single was an extremely purposeful one. Being named after such an iconic figure in the country music industry, it surely enticed people into wondering if maybe it was a collaboration or had something to do with him. Almost like a clickbait into checking out the song, which then told a very poignant story of lost love being remembered through music, a theme that runs very deep within Taylor's discography.
Interestingly, even Tim McGraw himself was slightly unsure about the title of Taylor's debut single, thinking that maybe it meant that because people were including him as titles and themes of songs, that he was getting old and that his career was kind of hitting that point where he was an old artist, whereas actually in the end, once he realised that Taylor wrote the song while in maths class and was still 16, that actually he was incredibly gracious to be included in the song and be the title of Taylor's debut single.
The time span of the Taylor Swift era can be pinpointed between the release of Tim McGraw in 2006 and somewhere in 2008. However, there is a lot of overlap with her constant radio touring, small performances, and television promo for herself as an artist throughout 2006 and even before that. These performances feature not only songs from her then upcoming album, but also unreleased tracks which could be major hints towards what we may eventually be able to see in the vault of Taylor Swift Taylor's version. Some notable, though contentious, unreleased songs that were in heavy rotation in her very early performances include, for example, Permanent Marker or I'd Lie.
The debut era not only includes the release of the standard and deluxe albums, but also a couple of EPs. Taylor's Christmas EP, once known as The Sounds of the Season, but now called the Taylor Swift Holiday Collection, that includes 2 original songs released in winter of 2007, as well as Taylor's Christmas EP, there's also Beautiful Eyes, which bridged the gap between Taylor Swift and Fearless by being released a mere couple of months in the summer of 2008, before Love Story. Depending on whether any of these songs are included in debut TV, the likelihood of them appearing on tour will change, but it would seem that they're very unlikely as of now.
As mentioned, the promo for her debut era included heavy radio touring, but also a long string of performances as an opening act from various country stars. The debut era doesn't really have a tour that goes with it, so these performances as an opening act are the only thing that we can really use to establish what a set list of fan favourites from the album may have looked like back then. These are some of the artists that Taylor became an opening act for. Firstly, we have Rascal Flatts from October the 19th to November the 3rd, 2006. She was included as an opening act on the Me and My Gang tour, which ran between 2006 and 2007. Her performance included Our Song, Teardrops on My Guitar, Should Have Said No, Tim McGraw, and Picture to Burn.
Taylor was also on George Strait's 2007 United States tour and has selected dates for Brad Paisley's Bonfire and Amplifiers tour in 2007.
During mid-2007, Taylor also became the opening act on several dates for Tim McGraw and Faith Hill's joint tour Soul to Soul 2 tour, and she also again opened up for Rascal Flatts for their Still Feels Good tour in 2008.
Although this first era in Taylor's discography is somewhat overlooked by many, it contributed greatly to launching her legendary career. It holds many records that are impressive considering that it was her first project to be released at only 16. One of these records is that it has the longest stay on the Billboard 200 by any album released in the 2000s. Taylor was also the youngest artist to achieve a number one hit on the Hot Country Songs chart with her song Our Song. This album also marked a key shift that happened in the country genre in the early 2000s, which opened the genre massively up to younger and more female audiences. In addition, Rolling Stone also said that if Taylor retired right after dropping her debut album, she'd still be remembered as a legend today. Rolling Stone also stated that Taylor debuted with complete mastery of a genre she was also completely transforming.
Following the Taylor Swift era, the songs from this album have appeared sporadically on her subsequent tours, including on the Fearless tour. She performed a total of 6 songs from debut. She also included songs on the Speak Now World Tour, the Red Tour, and even the Reputation Stadium Tour. When theorising about what songs may appear on the Eras tour, it's interesting to look back on these previous patterns to figure out what she may sing from debut. It is also interesting to point out that Taylor has performed every single song live from her debut album. This doesn't include any Taylor's version that isn't out as of right now. However, the last time she performed some songs from debut was in the Reputation Stadium tour. These songs included Our Song, Should Have Said No, A Place in This World, Invisible, Tied Together with a Smile, Tim McGraw, and Teardrops on My Guitar. With all of this in mind, it would seem that these are the songs that are probably most likely to return.
Now we know the facts and figures as to debut songs appearing throughout Taylor's eras, we can look at the statistics for each song and conclude by giving our personal guesses as to what may be included from Taylor Swift on the Eras tour. From Setlist FM we can see that Our Song is the most performed song off of debut, and it has been performed in total over 400 times. However, Tim McGraw, Picture to Burn, Should Have Said No and Teardrops on My Guitar are also very highly performed with over 200 performances each.
Now that we know all that we know, these 5 songs look to be kind of the most likely to be performed on the Eras tour. However, we have to keep in mind that she's obviously got a very limited amount of time to include everything, which we'll be getting into as the weeks go by. So from these 5, what are your opinions, Cameron? Which ones do you think are going to make an appearance?
I think from debut we're going to see 2. I think we'll see 2 songs. I think debut is going to have the least, purely because it's the first. It will definitely have some because obviously the way that this Eras tour has been branded, something from every album is going to be there. But I think it would be sad if only 1 was included. So I'm guessing 2, and I feel like 1 will probably have a mashup similar to the Reputation Stadium tour with Should Have Said No. I think that something will be mashed. But I do think that Our Song is almost confirmed. I think that that's definite. Very stadium friendly, very performance friendly. Is the most streamed song I think anyways off of debut, so it's kind of a fan favourite. It's fun, people will know it. So Our Song I think is a definite. Tim McGraw I think is a little bit too slow, maybe not the kind of right vibe. Hard to maybe mash with something else. So I think then it's kind of between Picture to Burn, Should Have Said No and Teardrops on My Guitar. Should Have Said No had a moment on the Reputation Stadium tour, so I'm not sure. And that was quite random at the time to kind of bring a debut song and kind of give it a moment like that. So I think that because Should Have Said No had a kind of a bit of a moment on the Reputation Stadium tour, maybe something like Pitch to Burn that hasn't really had a moment for quite a while might be brought back, but weirdly is slightly contentious. I think with its original version going quite viral on TikTok and maybe its kind of sentiment, I'm not too sure whether that's going to be brought back, because ironically it didn't have much of a place during the Reputation Stadium tour. And then there's Teardrops My Guitar, again quite a big single, was kind of Taylor's first real kind of crossover onto the pop charts. So I think that it's very likely to be our song, Teardrops My Guitar, or Pitch to Burn, but I'm thinking that it will be two out of those two, and the most confirmed I think is our song, so it's kind of a fight between Pitch to Burn and Teardrops My Guitar. What are you feeling about the kind of possible Eras Tour set list?
I completely agree with you. I definitely think that what we can base all of these episodes off and our final guesses for the Eras Tour as we lead up to it is the Reputation Stadium Tour, because it's the last one that we got. And the bit of information that we have got surrounding Lover never really mentioned anything from debut anyway, or not much. So I definitely agree with you. I think our song is a staple. It has to be there.
Yeah,
it has to be there. I do think it was such a big moment. It has acquired a new meaning to it over the years. I do think, from what we've said, Tim McGraw would be a lovely addition, just because our song and Tim McGraw are the two songs that we mentioned during the recap, because they are the two that kind of cemented this part of her legacy and the legacy of debut. So I think if I'm picking two, those are the two that I'm going with. Although I do understand what you mean, that Tim McGraw is much more of a stripped back song, but again, there could be a place for it in the whole of this massive concert that it's going to be.
We'll have a total solo song like our song, and I think we'll have one probably mashed with something, or maybe mashed in a way like the style Love Story You Belong With Me, where it's kind of, they're shortened and just kind of blur into each other but aren't necessarily mashed in the same way as They Should Have Said No and Bad Blood. So that's kind of what I'm thinking, but I think it's between these five anyway, but I think that it's likely to be about two.
The last thing that we can mention is that, of course, we don't know if there'll be surprise songs during the whole of the Eras tour. However, if there are, then it will be much more likely that we might get some of the more hidden gems within debut and subsequent albums. For example, again on the Reputation Stadium tour, she did bring out some very unlikely songs such as Invisible, Tied Together with a Smile, A Place in This World, which aren't technically, the most popular of choices, but they definitely do have a place. Yeah. From now, and with no current Taylor Swift Taylor's version, these are the most likely predictions considering the information we've gathered. Make sure to subscribe here on YouTube and join us next week as we discuss the legacy of Fearless and what we may see from Taylor's sophomore album on her upcoming tour.